You thought this was the end? It was only the beginning.
They say the delivery room is where miracles happen. They don't mention the nightmares that crawl out alongside them, or how sometimes the biggest shock isn't what comes out of your wife, but what comes out of the doctor's mouth. I'm Nick Renner, 40 years old, general manager of Romano's Italian restaurant on Maple Street. And until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was married to. I thought I understood the woman who'd shared my bed for 12 years, who'd given me two beautiful daughters, who'd promised to love me through sickness and health and all that other wedding vow garbage. The fluorescent lights in Briarwood General's delivery room buzzed like angry wasps above Marissa's sweaty face. She'd been pushing for 2 hours, her fitness instructor muscles straining against the hospital gown, her perfectly manicured nails digging crescents into my palm. "One more push, Mrs. Renner," Dr. Aoun encouraged, his usually steady voice carrying an odd tremor. The man had delivered half the babies in our suburban town, including our daughters Ava and Jamie 8 and 6 years ago. Nothing should have rattled him. Marissa screamed, a sound that seemed to tear through the sterile air and lodge itself in my chest. Then silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your stomach drop. Dr. Shu's face went white as the sheets. Not pale, white, like someone had drained every drop of color from his features. He stared down at whatever he was holding, his hands trembling. "Doctor?" I stepped forward, trying to see around his shoulder. "Is everything okay?" He looked up at me, his dark eyes wide with something I'd never seen before in a medical professional. Terror. Pure undiluted terror. His mouth moved without sound at first, like a fish gasping for air. Then barely a whisper. "Run. Just run." "What?" I laughed nervously. "What do you mean, run?" But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at Marissa, who was struggling to sit up, her face flushed and desperate. "Let me see my baby," she demanded, reaching out with shaking hands. "Give me my baby." Dr. Shu stepped back, cradling whatever he held against his chest. "Mrs. Renner, I need you to stay calm. We need to— Give me my child!" Marissa's voice cracked like a whip. In that moment, as Dr. Shu shifted, I caught a glimpse, just a flash of what he was holding. My brain struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. The shape was wrong. The limbs— there was something missing. Something fundamentally wrong. My knees went weak. The room tilted sideways. "Mr. Renner." Dr. Aoun's hand was suddenly on my shoulder and guiding me toward the door. "I need you to step outside, now. But that's my— Leave." His grip tightened. "Don't ask questions, just leave." The hallway outside the delivery room was a blur of white walls and concerned faces. Nurses whispered in clusters, their eyes following me as I stumbled toward the waiting area. My brother Tom was there, still in his police detective uniform, his face creased with worry. "Nick? Jesus, you look like you've seen a ghost. How's Marissa? How's the baby?" I couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the boulder that had lodged itself in my throat, because as I'd stared at that tiny, malformed thing in Dr. Shu's arms, one thought had crystallized in my mind with absolute clarity. It's not mine. The thought had been lurking in the shadows of my consciousness for months, maybe longer. All those late nights when Marissa claimed she was teaching private fitness sessions. The way she'd started showering immediately after coming home from the gym. The guilty looks, the defensive answers to innocent questions. And then there was Chase. Chase Morrison, 38 years old, ex-military, local hero who'd saved some kid from drowning at the town lake last summer. Chase with his perfect teeth and his perfect muscles and his perfect way of making every woman in Briarwood giggle like teenagers. Chase who had been Marissa's workout partner for the past year. Chase who'd been at our house for dinner just last week, sitting across from me at my own table, probably laughing inside at what a fool I was. "Nick?" Tom's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Talk to me, brother." I looked at him, this man who'd stood by me through every crisis of my adult life, and felt something crack inside my chest. I think, I said slowly, "I think I need a lawyer." The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of DNA tests, hushed phone conversations, and sleepless nights on Tom's couch. Marissa called constantly, her voice alternating between tears and rage, demanding to know why I'd left, why I wouldn't come home, why I was abandoning our family. I didn't answer her calls. I had my attorney, Miss Harris, handle all communication because I was busy. Busy gathering evidence. Busy confirming what my gut had been screaming for months. The DNA results came back on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my car outside the lab, hands shaking as I tore open the envelope. 0% probability of paternity. I laughed. Actually laughed, right there in the parking lot. Because what else do you do when your entire life reveals itself to be a lie? When the woman you've loved and trusted and built a future with turns out to be exactly the kind of person you never thought she could be. I drove home to what used to be home and found Marissa in the kitchen, feeding the baby from a bottle. She looked up when I walked in, hope flickering across her face. Nick, thank God. I've been so worried. The girls have been asking. I know, I said simply. The hope died. Know what? I pulled the DNA results from my jacket pocket and placed them on the counter between us. She stared at the papers like they were a poisonous snake. Nick, I can explain. Can you? I kept my voice level, conversational. Can you explain how my wife of 12 years has been screwing around behind my back? Can you explain how you let me believe this baby was mine? Can you explain how you looked me in the eye every single day and lied? She started crying then, the kind of pretty tears that had always worked on me before. It was a mistake. One time, Nick. I swear it was only one time. With Chase? Her face crumpled. How did you? Lucky guess. I turned toward the door. I've already filed for divorce. My attorney will be in touch. Nick, please. The girls need their father. You need to call Chase, I said without turning around. Tell him congratulations. He's a daddy. I left the house that day with nothing but a suitcase and a burning anger that felt like it might consume me from the inside out. Tom welcomed me into his spare bedroom without questions, just handed me a beer and said, "Whatever you need, brother." What I needed was answers. What I needed was to understand how thoroughly I'd been played. What I needed was to know who else had been laughing at the stupid, trusting husband while his wife spread her legs for the town hero. I was about to find out that the rabbit hole went deeper than I'd ever imagined. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, slipped under Tom's front door while we were both at work. Plain white, no return address, my name written in block letters across the front. Inside were photographs. High-quality color prints that left nothing to the imagination. Marissa and Chase in positions that would have made a porn star blush. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over the course of several months, in various locations around town. But it was the note that really got my attention. You don't know the half of it. The thing about small towns like Briarwood is that secrets have a half-life shorter than radioactive isotopes. By the time I walked into Romano's the next morning, every single employee was staring at me with that particular mixture of pity and curiosity that meant the news had spread. Morning, Nick, Sarah called from behind the hostess station. Sarah Martinez, 28, single, the kind of woman who'd been giving me lingering looks for the past 2 years, that I'd been too married and too stupid to notice. How are you holding up? Like a champ, I replied, forcing a smile. Nothing like public humiliation to start the day, right? She winced. People are talking. People always talk. What are they saying? Sarah glanced around, then leaned closer. That Marissa's been busy, that you found out about Chase. That the baby, she trailed off. Isn't mine, I finished. Yeah, that's accurate. I'm sorry, Nick. I always thought she was. Sarah caught herself. What? You always thought she was what? Nothing. It's not my place. I studied her face, seeing something there I'd missed before. Sarah, what do you know? She bit her lip, a gesture that would have been cute under different circumstances. It's just, some of the girls from her gym come in here for lunch sometimes. They talk, loudly. About? About how you're never home. How you're always working. How you, she flushed red. How I what? How you prefer watching porn to touching your wife. The words hit like a slap. She said that? Not her directly, but her friends, Nicole especially. She said Marissa was lonely, that you hadn't been intimate in months, that she had needs. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. What else? That Chase is attentive, that he makes her feel desired, that he's got stamina you don't have. Sarah looked mortified. I'm sorry, Nick, I shouldn't have. No, I said quietly, I need to hear this. What else are people saying? That she deserves better, that you're boring, that you've let yourself go. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper now, that any woman married to you would eventually look elsewhere. I stood there, in the middle of my own restaurant, surrounded by the staff I'd worked with for 5 years, and felt the last of my illusions crumble. Not only had Marissa betrayed me, she'd spent months poisoning the well, making sure that when the truth came out, I'd be the villain in the story. Well, I said finally, at least now I know why everyone's been looking at me like I kicked a puppy. Sarah reached out and touched my arm. For what it's worth, I never believed it. You're a good man, Nick. Thanks, I said. But good men finish last, don't they? That afternoon, I drove to Fitness First, the gym where Marissa taught classes and where, apparently, she'd been getting her real workouts. I parked across the street and watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she led a spin class, her body moving with the fluid grace that had first attracted me 15 years ago. Chase was there too, spotting for some middle-aged guy who was clearly trying to impress the women in yoga pants. Even from a distance, I could see the easy confidence in his movements, the way other people gravitated toward him like he was the sun and they were planets. I understood the appeal. Chase Morrison was everything I wasn't. Where I was average height, he was tall. Where I was lean from years of restaurant work and stress, he was built like a Greek statue. Where I was sarcastic and quiet, he was charming and outgoing. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. I was about to drive away when I saw them together. Marissa had finished her class and was walking toward the equipment room. Chase followed, his hand briefly touching the small of her back in a gesture so intimate, so possessive, that it made my vision blur with rage. They disappeared into the room together. I checked my watch, waited. 5 minutes. 10, 15. When they emerged, Marissa's hair was mussed, and Chase was adjusting his shirt. They separated quickly, professionally, but not before Chase leaned down and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and made a decision. If Marissa wanted to play games, if she wanted to humiliate me publicly while she screwed around behind my back, then fine. But she was about to learn that the quiet, boring husband she'd been taking for granted had some fight left in him. The first move came that night. I followed Chase home, keeping my distance, watching as he pulled into the driveway of his perfect suburban house where his perfect wife Erica was probably making his perfect dinner. But Chase didn't go inside. Instead, he walked around to the garage and emerged with a can of spray paint. I followed him back toward town, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't notice my headlights. He parked outside Tom's house, my temporary home, and crept toward my old Honda Civic, the one Marissa had been nagging me to replace for years. I watched from the shadows as he shook the can and began spraying across the hood. Big, bold letters. Underdog. The irony wasn't lost on me. Chase, the golden boy, the local hero, was vandalizing my car in the middle of the night like some teenage punk. It was almost too perfect. I waited until he finished, until he stepped back to admire his handiwork, before I emerged from the darkness. Nice work, I said conversationally. Really brings out the rust. Chase spun around, the paint can clattering to the asphalt. In the streetlight, his perfect face looked pale and startled. Nick, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you're vandalizing my car, which coincidentally is a crime. I stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead, just like adultery used to be. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Trouble? I laughed, and even to my own ears it sounded dangerous. Chase, you've been screwing my wife for months. You got her pregnant. You've been sitting at my dinner table, eating my food, and probably laughing at what a fool I am. And now you're worried about trouble? He straightened up, trying to reclaim some of his usual swagger. Marissa and we have something real. Something you never gave her. What I never gave her. The rage that had been simmering for weeks finally boiled over. I gave her everything. 12 years of my life. A home. Children. Loyalty. Fidelity. Apparently, those are worthless commodities in today's market. She needed more than that. She needed a man who wouldn't sneak around like a coward. I stepped even closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. She needed someone who wouldn't vandalize cars in the middle of the night like a punk teenager. Chase's jaw tightened. You think you're better than me. I think I'm more honest than you. Which, admittedly, isn't setting the bar very high. For a moment, I thought he might swing at me. I almost hoped he would. I'd been a decent boxer in college, and the idea of rearranging Chase's perfect features held considerable appeal. But he was smarter than that. Or maybe just more cowardly. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward his truck. "No," I agreed. "It's not." I watched him drive away, then looked down at my vandalized car, Underdog. The word seemed to glow in the streetlight, mocking and prophetic at the same time. Well, if that's what they wanted to call me, fine. But they were about to learn that sometimes the underdog has the biggest bite. The next morning, I found another envelope under Tom's door. This time it contained printouts of text messages, hundreds of them. Explicit, graphic, detailed descriptions of intimate acts that made my stomach turn. But what made it worse was that they weren't just between Marissa and Chase. There were messages to and from at least 3 other men. Names I recognized. Guys from the gym, from her yoga class, even the married father of one of Ava's classmates. At the bottom of the stack was another note. "The rabbit hole goes deeper, much deeper." I stared at the messages until the words blurred together, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just about an affair. This wasn't just about Chase. This was about a woman who'd been living a double life, who'd been using our marriage as a cover while she screwed half the men in Briarwood. I thought about my daughters, innocent and trusting, and how this would affect them when it all came out. Because it would come out. In a town this size, secrets this big never stayed buried. I thought about the humiliation, the whispers, the pitying looks I'd be getting for years to come. And then I thought about revenge. The Fitness First gym at 6 in the morning was a temple to vanity and self-improvement, filled with the kind of people who posted workout selfies and counted macros like religious devotees. I'd never been a member, but Sarah had helped me get a guest pass, claiming she wanted to start working out together. It was amazing how invisible you could become when you wore the right clothes and carried a water bottle. I'd been watching the morning routine for 3 days now, learning the patterns, figuring out who talked to whom and when they were most vulnerable to casual conversation. Liam Rodriguez was Chase's best friend and co-owner of the gym, a guy who looked like he'd been carved from granite and had the personality of a used car salesman. He ran what he called specialized fitness programs for select clients, which apparently meant expensive personal training sessions for bored housewives with too much time and money. I'd overheard enough conversations to understand that these sessions often involved more than just exercise. The way the women giggled when they talked about Liam's hands-on approach and intensive one-on-one training made it clear that Fitness First was running a high-end escort service disguised as a health club. And Marissa was right in the middle of it. "You're new here," a voice said behind me as I pretended to struggle with the lat pull-down machine. I turned to find a woman in her early 40s, blonde, attractive, in that aggressively maintained way that screamed expensive cosmetic procedures. She was wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments. "Yeah," I said, still figuring everything out. "I'm Erica Morrison. My husband Chase is one of the owners." Interesting. Chase's wife approaching me. This was either a coincidence or something much more calculated. "Nick," I replied, not mentioning my last name. "You look familiar. Do we know each other?" "I don't think so. I'd remember." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Are you married, Nick?" The question was casual, but there was something sharp underneath it. "Divorced," I said, "recently." "I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "It has its challenges." Erica stepped closer, ostensibly to help me adjust the machine settings, but really to get a better look at my face. "You know what the hardest part is? The betrayal. Finding out that the person you trusted most in the world has been lying to you." Our eyes met, and I saw something there that made my pulse quicken. She knew. Somehow, Chase's wife knew exactly who I was and why I was there. "Yeah," I said carefully, "that would be hard, especially when it's not just one person. When you realize your whole social circle has been keeping secrets, covering for each other, making you look like a fool." Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the machine. That's when you start thinking about payback. Payback's a dangerous game. So is marriage, and apparently. She released the machine and stepped back. "Nice meeting you, Nick. I hope we'll see each other again soon." She walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers and the distinct feeling that I'd just been recruited for something I didn't fully understand. That afternoon, I was back at Romano's, trying to focus on inventory and staff schedules, when Sarah approached with a concerned expression. Nick, you need to see this. She handed me her phone, open to the gym's private Facebook group. The post was from Nicole, Marissa's best friend and apparently the town's unofficial gossip coordinator. Ladies, just a reminder that some people can't handle the truth about their inadequacies and are now stalking our safe space. If you see Nick Renner lurking around the gym, please notify management immediately. Some men just can't accept when they've failed as husbands. The comments were brutal. Women I'd known for years, neighbors and acquaintances, were sharing their opinions about my shortcomings as a spouse, my failures in bed, my inability to satisfy a woman like Marissa. They talked about me like I was a dangerous stalker, rather than a betrayed husband, trying to understand what had happened to his marriage. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly. I know this must be humiliating. You know what's funny, I said, scrolling through the comments? Half these women are probably cheating on their own husbands. But I'm the villain because I found out about it. What are you going to do? I looked at her, this woman who'd been nothing but kind to me, who'd helped me when she had no reason to, and made a decision. I'm going to fight back. That evening, I met Tom at Murphy's Bar, a dive on the outskirts of town, where cops and blue-collar workers went to drink away their problems. Tom was already 3 beers in when I arrived, which meant he'd had a particularly bad day dealing with Briarwood's criminal element. So, he said without preamble, how deep does this thing go? I'd shown him the text messages and photos earlier, watching his detective instincts kick in as he studied the evidence. Deeper than I thought. It's not just Chase. There's a whole network of them. A secret couples scene? Something like that. The gym is a front for high-end paid illicit activity, from what I can tell. Lonely housewives paying for personal training that includes happy endings. Tom shook his head. And Marissa was right in the middle of it, maybe even recruiting new clients. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I've been married to a madam and didn't even know it. You could go to the police if there's paid illicit activity happening. With what evidence? Text messages that could be interpreted a dozen different ways? Photos that prove adultery but not paid illicit activity? I took a long drink of my beer. Besides, I want something more personal than a court case. Nick, I want them to feel what I felt. The humiliation, the betrayal, the knowledge that everyone around you has been laughing behind your back. I met his eyes. I want them destroyed. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Be careful, brother. Revenge has a way of eating people alive. So does betrayal. The next morning brought another envelope, but this time it was hand-delivered by a familiar face. Erica Morrison stood on Tom's front porch, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive athleisure wear. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I invited her in, curious about what Chase's wife wanted with me. She declined coffee and got straight to the point. My husband has been cheating on me for 3 years, she said. With your wife, with half the women at that gym, and with at least 2 of my supposed friends. I'm sorry. Don't be. I stopped loving him a long time ago. But I do love the lifestyle he provides, and I love making him pay for his infidelity in small, creative ways. Such as? She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. Such as documenting everything. Photos, videos, financial records, client lists. Everything you'd need to destroy not just him, but the entire operation. Why help me? Because you're the perfect patsy. The angry ex-husband with obvious motive. When this all comes out, when the gym gets shut down and reputations get ruined, you'll take the blame. Chase will look like the victim of a vindictive stalker rather than the architect of his own destruction. Her honesty was refreshing in its brutality. And what do I get out of being your patsy? Complete and total revenge against everyone who betrayed you. Plus, when the dust settles, I'll make sure you get custody of your daughters. I have enough dirt on Marissa to bury her in family court. I studied her face, looking for tells, for signs of deception, but Erica Morrison was a woman who'd been playing a long game for years, and she was very good at it. What's the plan? She opened her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Everything you need is in here. Photos, financial records, client communications. The question is, how badly do you want to make them pay? I thought about Marissa's lies, Chase's arrogance, the Facebook posts, calling me a stalker, the years of being taken for granted and made to feel inadequate. Badly, I said. Very badly. Erica's smile widened. Then let's burn it all down. The beauty of a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. The curse of a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. I was about to turn that curse into a tool. The first target was Nicole, Marissa's best friend, and the woman who'd posted that Facebook message calling me a stalker. Nicole worked as a real estate agent, which meant her reputation was everything. One whisper of scandal could destroy years of carefully built professional relationships. The envelope Erica had given me contained photos of Nicole's own training sessions with Liam, along with text messages that made it clear she was paying for more than just fitness advice. But the real goldmine was the financial records showing that Nicole had been using her real estate connections to help launder money from the gym's escort operation. I started small, a few anonymous tips to the state real estate licensing board about potential ethical violations. Some carefully worded questions posted to local Facebook groups about whether anyone else had noticed irregularities in some of Nicole's recent property deals. Nothing accusatory, just concerned citizen stuff that would get people talking. Within a week, Nicole was fielding calls from investigators and losing clients who didn't want to be associated with any hint of scandal. I watched from across the street as she paced in front of her office, phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly at whoever was on the other end. The second target was the gym itself. Erica had provided me with security footage that showed exactly what kind of specialized training was happening in the private rooms. The footage was date-stamped and showed a clear pattern of married women entering the rooms with Liam or Chase and emerging disheveled and satisfied. I didn't release the footage directly. Instead, I sent copies to the husbands of the women involved, along with anonymous notes suggesting they might want to check their wives' gym schedules more carefully. The effect was immediate and devastating. Within days, 3 marriages imploded spectacularly. 2 of the husbands confronted their wives publicly, leading to screaming matches in grocery store parking lots and restaurant dining rooms. The third husband filed for divorce and immediately demanded a forensic accounting of their joint finances. But the real masterstroke was the health department complaint. Using information from Erica's files, I documented dozens of health code violations at Fitness First: improper cleaning of equipment, unlicensed massage therapy, failure to maintain proper ventilation in private rooms. I submitted a detailed complaint to the county health department, complete with photos and witness statements from anonymous sources. The inspection was scheduled for a Friday afternoon right in the middle of the gym's busiest time. I made sure to be across the street with a clear view when the health inspectors arrived, along with what appeared to be representatives from the state licensing board. I watched Chase and Liam scramble to explain why their fitness facility had massage tables and soundproofed rooms, why there were no licensed massage therapists on staff, and why several of their private training areas looked more like hotel rooms than exercise spaces. The gym was shut down pending investigation. But I wasn't done, not even close. That evening, I drove to the Briarwood Community Center, where the monthly town council meeting was being held. It was usually a sparsely attended affair, mostly concerned with zoning issues and budget discussions. But tonight, I had something special planned. I'd called ahead and gotten myself added to the public comment portion of the agenda. When my name was called, I walked to the podium with a folder full of documents and a prepared statement. "Good evening," I began, looking out at the handful of residents in attendance, including several reporters from the local newspaper. "My name is Nick Renner, and I'm here to talk about a public health crisis that's been hiding in plain sight in our community." I opened my folder and began reading from the financial records Erica had provided: names, dates, amounts, a detailed accounting of how Fitness First had been operating as a front for paid illicit activity, how local women had been paying for personal services, how money had been laundered through legitimate businesses. The room was dead silent by the time I finished. Council members were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. In the back of the room, I could see reporters frantically taking notes. "I have documentation to support everything I've said tonight," I continued. "Financial records, photographs, communications, all of which I'm prepared to turn over to the appropriate authorities." I placed the folder on the podium and walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who would be talking about nothing else for months. The story broke in the Briarwood Gazette the next morning. Local gym accused of paid illicit activity ring. By afternoon, it had been picked up by regional news outlets. By evening, there were news vans parked outside Fitness First and reporters knocking on doors throughout the neighborhood. Chase and Liam were arrested on charges of operating a house of paid illicit activity and money laundering. Several of their clients, including Nicole, were brought in for questioning. The scandal dominated local news for weeks. But the best part was watching Marissa's world collapse in real time. She'd been so confident, so sure that she held all the cards. Even after I'd left, even after the divorce papers were filed, she'd maintained that air of superiority that said she was the victim in this situation, that I was the inadequate husband who'd driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. That confidence evaporated when her name appeared in the newspaper as a person of interest in the investigation. When reporters started calling her for comment, when the other mothers at school began avoiding her, whispering behind her back, treating her like the pariah she'd always claimed I was, I watched from across the street as she loaded the baby into her car, probably heading to another lawyer's office or another crisis management meeting. She looked haggard, desperate, nothing like the confident fitness instructor who'd been holding court at the gym just weeks earlier. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? Erica, my partner in destruction, the woman who'd handed me the tools I needed to tear down everything that had hurt me. I typed back, what did you have in mind? The response came immediately. Something more personal. Something that will make them understand exactly what they've lost. I stared at the message, thinking about how far I'd already come, how much damage I'd already done. A reasonable person would probably stop here, would be satisfied with the public humiliation and legal consequences that were already destroying my enemies. But I wasn't feeling particularly reasonable. I was feeling like a man who'd been pushed too far, who had been made to look like a fool for too long, who deserved to see his betrayer suffer as much as he had. I typed back, I'm listening. The plan Erica outlined was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. It would require careful timing, perfect execution, and a willingness to cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But it would also ensure that Chase, Marissa, and everyone who'd participated in my humiliation would never forget the price of betraying Nick Renner. I looked at my reflection in the phone screen, barely recognizing the man staring back at me. 3 months ago, I'd been a trusting husband and father, a man who believed in loyalty and commitment and doing the right thing. Now I was something else entirely, something harder, more calculating, more dangerous. Something that wouldn't stop until everyone who had wronged me had paid in full. The Briarwood Youth Soccer League's annual tournament was the kind of wholesome community event that defined our small town. Families gathered on Saturday mornings with folding chairs and coolers, cheering for their kids while gossiping about their neighbors. It was exactly the kind of public venue where desperate people made desperate mistakes. I knew Marissa would be there. Ava's team had made it to the semifinals, and despite everything that had happened between us, Marissa wouldn't miss her daughter's big game. She was many things, a liar, a cheater, a woman who destroyed our family, but she genuinely loved our girls, which made what she was planning even more unforgivable. Erica had tipped me off through a mutual acquaintance who'd overheard Marissa on the phone. Apparently, my soon-to-be ex-wife had decided that the best way to salvage her reputation was to disappear with the children, claiming I was unstable and potentially dangerous. She'd already withdrawn the girls from school, claiming a family emergency, and had plane tickets to her sister's place in Oregon. The plan was simple. Create a scene at the soccer game, make me look like the unhinged ex-husband everyone expected me to be. Then use that as justification for taking the children and fleeing the state. By the time the legal system caught up with her, she'd be established in Oregon with a new identity and a sob story about escaping a harmful and controlling marriage. It might have worked too if she hadn't underestimated how much I'd learned about playing dirty. I arrived at the soccer complex early, before the crowds gathered, and positioned myself with a clear view of the parking lot. Tom was there in an unmarked police car, ready to intervene if things went sideways. Sarah had volunteered to help, bringing a group of my restaurant employees who could serve as witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. At exactly 10:30, Marissa's silver SUV pulled into the lot. She got out wearing designer sunglasses and the kind of workout clothes that screamed victim of circumstances beyond my control. Ava and Jamie emerged from the back seat, looking confused and unhappy. I watched as Marissa scanned the crowd, probably looking for me, planning her performance. She had no idea that half the parents at the tournament had already seen the news coverage about the gym scandal, that her reputation was already in tatters, that her plan to paint me as the villain was doomed from the start. She also had no idea that Chase was about to make an appearance. I'd arranged for his bail to be posted that morning, courtesy of an anonymous benefactor who wanted to see how this drama played out. Chase Morrison, local hero turned accused pimp, walking into a crowd of suburban parents who'd been reading about his exploits in the newspaper for weeks. He arrived just as Ava's game was starting, probably thinking he could slip in unnoticed and provide moral support to Marissa. Instead, he walked into a wall of hostile stares and whispered comments that followed him across the field like a toxic cloud. I watched from my folding chair as parents pulled their children closer when Chase walked by, as conversations stopped and resumed in urgent whispers behind his back. The man who'd once been the center of attention at every community event was now a pariah, and he clearly hadn't expected such a cold reception. Marissa saw him coming and her face went white. This wasn't part of her plan. Having Chase show up at a family event in front of all these witnesses would only reinforce the narrative that she was the cheating wife rather than the wrong party. She tried to wave him away, but Chase was either too proud or too stupid to take the hint. He walked right up to where she was sitting and leaned down to whisper something in her ear. That's when I made my move. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and walked over to where my daughters were warming up with their team. The girls saw me coming and ran over, their faces lighting up with genuine joy. "Daddy!" Jamie threw herself into my arms. "I didn't know you were coming. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." I hugged both girls, acutely aware that every parent on the sideline was watching this reunion. "How are you feeling about the game?" "Nervous," Ava admitted, "but excited. That's my girl. Just remember what we practiced, okay? Keep your head up, watch for opportunities, and don't be afraid to take your chance." It was good advice for soccer. It was even better advice for life. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Marissa approaching, Chase trailing behind her like a guilty shadow. Her jaw was set in that determined line I remembered from 1,000 marital arguments, the expression that said she was about to start a fight she was convinced she could win. "Girls, go back to your team," she said sharply. "Your father shouldn't be here." Ava and Jamie looked between us, confusion and hurt written across their young faces. They didn't understand why their parents couldn't be in the same place anymore, why every interaction had to be a battlefield. "Actually," I said calmly, "I have every right to be here. These are my daughters, and this is a public event. You're supposed to stay away from us. The restraining order." "What restraining order?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "Because according to my attorney, no restraining order has been filed. You're thinking of the one I filed against Chase here, prohibiting him from coming within 100 yards of my children." Chase stepped forward, his face flushing red. "You can't keep me away from what? From children who aren't yours? From a woman who's about to be exposed as involved in paid illicit activity?" I kept my voice level, conversational, but loud enough for the parents around us to hear. "Actually, I think I can." The crowd was definitely paying attention now. Cell phones were coming out, parents were edging closer to hear better, and somewhere in the distance I could see Tom getting out of his car. Marissa's composure was starting to crack. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing the girls." "I'm embarrassing them," I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. "Marissa, your name has been in the newspaper for 2 weeks as part of a paid illicit activity investigation. You've been sleeping with half the men in town while married to me. You're planning to kidnap our daughters and flee the state, and I'm the one embarrassing them? That's not, I never what? Never took money for love? Never participated in the escort operation at the gym? Never planned to disappear with my children?" I pulled out my phone again and started reading. "Because I have text messages that say otherwise. Would you like me to share them with everyone here?" The color drained from her face. Around us, parents were staring openly now, some recording with their phones, others calling to their own children to come closer. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Chase, would you like to tell everyone what really happened at those personal training sessions? Or should I let the police reports speak for themselves?" Chase looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. The confident, swaggering man who'd vandalized my car and stolen my wife was nowhere to be seen. In his place was a sweaty, nervous defendant who was realizing that his legal troubles were about to get much worse. "This is harassment," Marissa said desperately. "You can't what? Can't attend my daughter's soccer game? Can't speak the truth in public? Can't protect my children from a mother who's planning to kidnap them?" That's when Tom arrived. his detective badge clearly visible as he approached our little group. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "No problem," I said. "Just a family discussion about custody arrangements and travel plans." Tom looked at Marissa, then at Chase, then at the suitcases visible in the back of Marissa's SUV. "Ma'am, are you planning to travel with those children?" "It's none of your business." "Actually, it is my business. There's an active custody dispute, and removing children from the state without proper authorization is considered kidnapping." Tom's voice was professionally neutral, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "I'm going to need to see some documentation." What followed was the most humiliating 15 minutes of Marissa's life. In front of half the parents in Briarwood, she was forced to admit that she had no legal right to take the children out of state, that she'd withdrawn them from school without my knowledge, that she'd been planning to flee with them to avoid the consequences of her own actions. Tom didn't arrest her. There wasn't quite enough evidence for kidnapping charges, but he did make it clear that any attempt to leave Briarwood with the children would result in immediate legal action. Chase, meanwhile, was quietly informed that his presence at a youth sporting event violated the terms of his bail, which prohibited him from being around minors. He was escorted away in handcuffs, much to the delight of the smartphone-wielding parents who'd been documenting the entire confrontation. As the crowd dispersed and the soccer games resumed, I found myself sitting alone on the bleachers with my daughters, who were trying to process what they'd just witnessed. "Daddy," Ava said quietly, "is Mommy in trouble?" "Yes, sweetheart. She made some bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences." "Are we going to live with you now?" I looked at these two innocent faces, these children who'd been caught in the middle of an adult war they didn't understand, and felt something crack inside my chest. "We'll figure it out," I promised. "But no matter what happens, you need to know that both your parents love you very much. Sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't change how much we love you." It was a lie, of course. Marissa's love for the girls was real, but it was selfish, possessive, the kind of love that put her own needs first. She'd been willing to traumatize them with a cross-country kidnapping rather than face the consequences of her actions. But they didn't need to know that, not yet. As I watched Ava score the winning goal in her team's semifinal victory, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd won this battle, had publicly humiliated my enemies, and protected my children. But the war was far from over, and the cost was starting to become clear. I was no longer the man I'd been 6 months ago. That man had been trusting, optimistic, willing to believe the best of people. This new version of me was harder, more calculating, capable of orchestrating the systematic destruction of people who'd wronged me. I wasn't sure which version I preferred, but I knew which one was more likely to survive what was coming next. The thing about small-town scandals is that they have a natural life cycle. Initial shock, followed by intense gossip, followed by gradual acceptance as people move on to the next drama. I'd been counting on that cycle to provide cover for what I was planning next. What I hadn't counted on was how desperate cornered animals could become. The break-in attempt happened on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the soccer field confrontation. I was in my apartment above Romano's, a temporary arrangement that had become more permanent as the divorce proceedings dragged on, when the security system I'd installed started blaring. I'd been expecting something like this. Desperate people do desperate things, and Marissa, Chase, and their remaining allies were definitely desperate. The gym was permanently closed, Chase was facing serious criminal charges, and Marissa was looking at losing custody of the children, along with any claim to respectability in Briarwood. But I hadn't expected all three of them to show up together. I watched from my bedroom window as Marissa's SUV pulled into the alley behind the restaurant, followed by Chase's pickup truck and Nicole's sedan. 3 people who'd spent months plotting behind my back, now forced into an open alliance by their mutual desperation. They thought they were being clever, approaching from the back where the streetlights didn't reach, where the security cameras had blind spots. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last month turning my temporary home into a fortress, complete with hidden cameras, motion sensors, and a direct line to Tom's personal cell phone. I also hadn't told them about Erica. Chase's wife had been my secret tool from the beginning, feeding me information and helping orchestrate the destruction of everyone who'd betrayed me. But she'd also been playing a longer game, one that I was only beginning to understand. As I watched the three conspirators huddle in the alley, probably finalizing their plan to break into my apartment and steal whatever evidence they thought I had on them, Erica emerged from the shadows like an avenging angel. Well, well, her voice carried clearly in the still night air. The gang's all here. Marissa spun around, her face pale in the dim light. Erica, what are you doing here? Watching my husband and his hoe make fools of themselves one last time. Erica's voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was something underneath it that made my skin crawl. Did you really think you could break in here without consequences? Chase stepped forward, trying to reclaim some of his lost authority. This doesn't concern you, Erica. Go home. Go home. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. To the house I bought with my money, to wait for you to come back from another night of humiliating me? I don't think so. That's when I noticed the camera crew. Hidden in the van across the street, professional equipment pointed at the alley, recording everything that was happening. Erica hadn't just been helping me destroy her husband and his lovers. She had been documenting it all for a much larger audience. Surprise, she called up to my window, knowing I was watching. I hope you don't mind, but I invited some friends from Channel 7 to document tonight's festivities. They're doing a story on suburban crime and corruption. You're all going to be famous. The effect on the three conspirators was immediate and devastating. Nicole immediately started backing toward her car, but found her way blocked by another camera operator who'd emerged from the shadows. Chase was looking around wildly, probably calculating his chances of fighting his way out. And Marissa just stood there, finally understanding how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. You set us up, she said, her voice barely audible. No, Erica replied. You set yourselves up. I just made sure there were cameras rolling when you did it. That's when the police arrived. Tom's unmarked car pulled into the alley, followed by two patrol units with their lights flashing. The quiet residential street was suddenly alive with activity as officers emerged and began securing the scene. Evening, folks, Tom called out, his voice carrying the weary authority of a man who'd seen this kind of stupidity too many times. Anyone want to explain what's going on here? What followed was the most satisfying 30 minutes of my adult life. I watched from my window as the three people who destroyed my marriage, humiliated me publicly, and tried to steal my children were arrested for attempted breaking and entering, conspiracy, and violation of bail conditions. But the real show was just beginning. As the news crew set up their lights and began conducting interviews, Erica Morrison transformed from suburban housewife into avenging fury. She had documentation for everything. Financial records showing how Chase and Marissa had been stealing from the gym's clients, photos proving the extent of the illicit activity operation, recordings of conversations where they'd planned to frame me as an unstable stalker. This man, she said, pointing at her husband as he was loaded into a police car, has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a fitness center. He's been exploiting vulnerable women, destroying families, and corrupting everything he's touched. And this woman, she turned to Marissa, has been his willing accomplice, using her marriage as cover while she participated in activities that would make someone involved in illicit behavior blush. The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every moment of their public destruction. By morning, the story would be on every local news station. By afternoon, it would be picked up by national outlets hungry for salacious content. Chase Morrison, local hero turned criminal defendant. Marissa Renner, fitness instructor turned escort. Nicole Patterson, real estate agent turned money launderer. Their names would be forever linked to the biggest scandal in Briarwood's history. But I wasn't done yet. As the police finished their work and the news crews packed up their equipment, I made my way down to the alley where Erica was standing alone, watching her husband's truck being towed away. Why? I asked. Oh, why help me destroy him? She turned to look at me, and in the harsh glare of the streetlights, I could see the years of pain and humiliation written across her face. Because he thought I was stupid, she said simply. He thought I didn't know about the affairs, the money laundering, the way he'd been making me look like a fool for years. He thought I was just another suburban housewife who'd accept anything as long as the credit cards kept working. And instead, I documented everything. Every affair, every financial irregularity, every moment of his arrogance and stupidity. I've been building a case against him for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to destroy him completely. Why wait? Why not just divorce him and take half of everything? Erica smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen on a human face. Because half wasn't enough. I wanted everything, his reputation, his freedom, his future. I wanted him to lose it all, the way he made me lose my dignity and self-respect. I understood then that I hadn't been the architect of this revenge. I'd been a tool in someone else's war, a useful tool for a woman who'd been planning destruction on a scale that made my own efforts look amateur. And Marissa? Collateral damage. She chose to involve herself with my husband, chose to participate in his criminal activities, chose to humiliate you and destroy your family. She earned everything that's coming to her. As if summoned by our conversation, Marissa appeared in the alley, having apparently been released on her own recognizance, pending formal charges. She looked haggard, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd been running fitness classes and seducing married men just months earlier. Nick, she said, approaching cautiously, we need to talk. No, I replied, we really don't. Please, I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. For the girls, they need both their parents. They need parents they can respect, parents who tell the truth, parents who don't get arrested for conspiracy and illicit activity. I looked at this woman I'd once loved, this stranger who'd shared my bed and borne my children and felt nothing but contempt. They need better than what you've become. I can change. I can be better. You can face the consequences of your choices, I interrupted. You can accept that actions have repercussions, that betrayal has a price, that some things can't be fixed with tears and apologies. She stared at me for a long moment, probably seeing something in my face that told her this conversation was over, that the man she'd married was gone forever. What happened to you? She asked quietly. You used to be kind. You used to forgive people. I used to trust people, I replied. And I used to believe that marriage meant something, that loyalty mattered, that the people closest to me wouldn't stab me in the back for sport. You cured me of those delusions. So this is it? You're going to destroy me completely? I'm not destroying you, Marissa. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. She walked away then, shoulders slumped in defeat, probably heading back to whatever temporary shelter she'd found since losing the house, the gym, and her reputation. I watched her go, feeling nothing but relief that this chapter of my life was finally closing. Satisfied? Erica asked. I considered the question. My enemies were destroyed, my children were safe, my reputation was restored. The people who'd betrayed me were facing criminal charges and social ostracism. Justice, of a sort, had been served, but satisfaction was a more complex emotion than I'd expected. Yes, I said finally. I think I am. The next morning brought a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Tom standing in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression. We need to talk, he said. We sat at my kitchen table, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. Finally, Tom spoke. Chase Morrison hanged himself in his cell last night. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd wanted to destroy the man, to humiliate him, to make him pay for what he'd done to my family. I hadn't wanted him dead. Self-inflicted death? Left a note confessing to everything. The illicit activity, the money laundering, the affairs. He also implicated several other people who haven't been charged yet. Tom studied my face. How do you feel about that? I thought about it honestly. How did I feel about the death of the man who'd stolen my wife, fathered a child with her, and helped destroy my marriage? Empty, I said finally. I thought I'd feel more. Revenge isn't what people think it is, Tom said quietly. It doesn't heal the wound, it just creates new ones. Are you saying I was wrong? I'm saying you got justice. Whether that's the same thing as being right, that's for you to figure out. After Tom left, I sat alone in my apartment, thinking about the cost of the war I'd won. Chase was dead. Marissa was facing prison time and had lost custody of our daughters. Nicole's real estate career was over, her marriage destroyed. Dozens of other people had been caught up in the scandal, their lives forever changed by their association with the Fitness First investigation. And me? I had my children back, my reputation restored, and the satisfaction of seeing my enemies destroyed. But I also had the knowledge that I was capable of orchestrating the systematic destruction of human beings that I could manipulate people and situations with a skill that frightened me. The man I'd been 6 months ago wouldn't recognize the man I'd become. The question was whether that transformation was worth the price everyone had paid. I looked out my window at the quiet streets of Briarwood, this small town that would be talking about the fitness first scandal for years to come, and realized that I didn't have an answer to that question. Maybe that was answer enough. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my new house, bought with the settlement money from Marissa's forfeited assets, watching Ava and Jamie eat breakfast before school. They'd adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience, the way children do when adults finally stop creating chaos around them. Marissa had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for her role in the illicit activity ring, though she'd likely serve less than one with good behavior. She'd be allowed supervised visits with the girls when she was released, assuming she could rebuild some semblance of a stable life. Nicole had fled Briarwood in disgrace, her real estate license revoked, and her marriage dissolved. Last I'd heard, she was working as a waitress in some town where nobody knew her history. Erica had divorced Chase posthumously, inheriting everything he'd owned while avoiding any legal consequences for her role in exposing the criminal enterprise. She'd moved to Florida, where she was apparently living quite comfortably on the proceeds from the gym's liquidation. And me? I was learning to be a single father, running my restaurant and trying to figure out who I was now that the war was over. "Daddy," Jamie said, looking up from her cereal, "are you happy now?" It was such a simple question from such an innocent source, but it cut right to the heart of everything I'd been struggling with. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. "I think I am." Because despite everything that had happened, despite the cost and the casualties and the moral complexity of what I'd done, I had my daughters back. I had a future that belonged to me rather than to the people who'd been manipulating and betraying me. I had won. And sometimes, in a world where good people finish last and nice guys get trampled by those willing to play dirty, winning is enough.